Good morning and welcome to STL History Live Series. I'm Tammy Goldman and I'm Director of Tourism and Group Sales at the Missouri Historical Society. But today I'm your behind the scenes assistant to ensure this program runs smoothly. Fingers crossed. Before we begin, let me take a few moments to share my gratitude and support that we receive from the Zoo Museum Tax District. We sincerely thank you for your tax contributions. To those in our audience that are our members, thank you so much. We appreciate your continued support. For those that are interested in becoming a member, I will feature a link to the page on our website, which you may copy and paste later in this program. So a few technical points to mention before we get going with our program today. This will be about 30 minutes, a PowerPoint presentation followed by a 10-minute question and answer. You may submit your questions through the Q&A tab located on your toolbar that you'll find at the bottom of the page. Please submit your questions at the end and we will address as many questions as we can get to at the end of the program. Today we are providing closed captioning. To turn it on, you can scroll to the closed caption button also on the toolbar located at the bottom of your screen. And now, for the reason you are tuned in today to get your Hamilton fix, this program is presented by archivist Molly Codner and acquisitions librarian Kelly Brown. So sit back and enjoy. Take it away, Molly.
All right, sorry about that. Thank you so much, Tammy, and thank you everyone for being here today. You know, this is something that Kelly and I were asked to gather in 2017, actually. Tammy asked us to figure out if we had, what documents we had about Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr. And Kelly and I usually do this for groups who come to the Missouri Historical Society Library and Research Center at 225 South Skinker so that people can actually see the documents in person. Unfortunately, of course, we can not do that right now, but we're happy to at least be able to show these documents to you virtually. I have to say that when Tammy first asked us to do this, I didn't really think that we would have a lot of documents about Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr, but I was completely wrong about that. And that is primarily thanks to, sorry, my screen is not working. I cannot advance the slides, just a minute. Oh, there we go. So it is primarily thanks to this man, William K. Bixby, who was born in Adrian, Michigan in 1857. After he graduated from high school in 1873, he started to work as a baggage handler for a railroad in Texas. So that was his first job, working as a baggage handler. But he was eventually asked to come to St. Louis, and he eventually started working for the American Car and Foundry Company in St. Louis. And he actually eventually became the president of that company and the chairman of the board and became extremely wealthy. And one of his great passions was that he was a collector of items such as manuscripts, books, and art. So, and you can see from the slide that he was also president of the Missouri Historical Society from 1907 to 1913. And then later on in the 1920s. So the Missouri Historical Society was a great benefactor of the manuscripts that he collected. Some of our really wonderful Civil War collections and others are thanks to William K. Bixby. And one of those collections was the Thomas Jefferson collection. the Missouri Historical Society actually has the third largest collection of Thomas Jefferson's papers behind the Library of Congress, which of course has the largest, and the Massachusetts Historical Society. And there's a large one at the University of Virginia also. But that collection includes 2 letters from Thomas Jefferson to Angelica Schuyler Church. Of course, if you've seen the musical, you know her as one of the Schuyler daughters. She was the eldest daughter of General Philip Schuyler Church. And she was also, of course, the sister of Elizabeth Schuyler Hamilton and the sister-in-law of Alexander Hamilton. And their relationship was, let's just say, interesting. And she was married to a man named John Barker Church. And in 1783, Angelica and her husband and their family moved to Europe, where he was a U.S. envoy to France. And during this time, Angelica befriended Benjamin Franklin, who was the minister to France at that time, and then to Franklin's successor, Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson, who was single, as you can see from these letters that I'll read part of in a minute, was quite smitten with Angelica. This is a letter from February 17th, 1788, and I'm going to look away here to read part of it. He says, "You speak, madam, in your note of adieu, of civilities which I never rendered you. What you kindly call such were but the gratifications of my own heart, for indeed that was much gratified in seeing and serving you. The morning you left us, all was wrong. Even the sunshine was provoking, with which I never quarreled before. I took it into my head he shone only to throw light on our loss, to present a cheerfulness not at all in unison with my mind. I mounted my horse earlier than common, and took by instinct the road you had taken." So this next letter, which was written on February 15th, 1789, right before both Angelica and Thomas Jefferson returned to the United States. Angelica returned home, as regularly as she could to see her family. And this, I believe, was sent just before they returned in 1789, which pertains to the songs from the musical in Act 2, What Did I Miss by Thomas Jefferson, and then Take a Break about the Schuyler family. So just to read part of this, Thomas Jefferson wrote, "I am sorry, my dear friend, you go so soon as March. In truth, it is a month too soon, and the most disagreeable month possible to be passed at sea. About the middle of April, the wind ceases, and the weather becomes mild and settled, like your own temper. Madame de Corny tells me you will return in September, still an error of a month. But your friends at New York will tell you that October and November are a better season for the sea than September. I cherish your happiness too much not to feel pain for the uneasy moments which the boisterous equinoctial months will give you. I shall return in October, and return with infinitely more pleasure if it can be in your company. I shall need your solace. You will be coming to your most cherished objects, while I shall be leaving mine." So to move away from Thomas Jefferson to the main character of the musical, Alexander Hamilton, of course. This letter was a letter from Alexander Hamilton to a man named Major Jacob Kingsbury, written on December 2nd, 1799. This one was not actually donated by William Bixby. This came from the Kingsbury family. At this time, Alexander Hamilton, he had retired to the private sector in 1795, but in 1798, he was called back to public service during what was called the Quasi-War, which was really an unofficial, undeclared war between the navies of the United States and France. Jacob Kingsbury had been serving in the military for 14 years straight. And he sent a letter to Alexander Hamilton asking for a leave of absence of 12 to 14 months. And this is the reply that he received from Alexander Hamilton. Hamilton wrote, "Sir, I have received your letters of the 30th of September and of the 30th of November, and am obliged by the polite expressions which are personal to me. It is impossible that you should have leave of absence for so long a period as that you speak of. You will therefore hold yourself in readiness to enter upon service on the 1st of April next. At that time, you will report yourself to me. With great consideration, I am sincerely your obedient servant." So I will say that the soldiers never actually fought. So I don't know what the emergency was that he needed to be there, but that was Hamilton's reply. So to move from Hamilton to Aaron Burr, this again, we do have a collection of Aaron Burr's papers, thanks to William Bixby. This is a letter that Aaron Burr wrote to a man named Caesar A. Rodney, who at that time was a state representative in Delaware. Burr started writing this letter on March 3rd, 1801. And I was not able to show the full text of the letter here, unfortunately. But the beginning of the letter is about the nomination or appointment of the minister to France. And in it, Burr writes, "Mr. Short has not been nominated to France, nor has anyone since Bayard. Mr. Adams has informed the Senate that the reasons of Mr. Bayard's refusal will be equally applicable to any other suitable person, and that he shall therefore leave the treaty to be forwarded by his successor." So not particularly an interesting letter, but the real treasure is at the bottom of the letter, and that's the part that you can see here. While Burr started the letter on March 3rd, 1801, he finished it the following day on March 4th, 1801. And the thing that's interesting about it is that on March 3rd, 1801, Burr took the oath of office as Vice President of the United States. And of course, Thomas Jefferson became president. So at the bottom of the letter, Burr wrote, "The mail closed at an earlier hour than I had supposed. It affords me the opportunity to add that we have gone through the ceremony. The day was serene and temperate. The concourse of people immense. All passed off handsomely. Great joy, but no riot, no accident. The papers contain Jefferson's speech. A.B.'s, meaning Burr's, cannot be published, for it was not written. It consisted of about 3 sentences." Now, I will also add that this is a very friendly letter from Burr to Caesar Rodney in 1801. But 6 years later, Rodney was the U.S. Attorney General and was one of the prosecuting attorneys when Aaron Burr was tried for treason, which is a long story that I don't know if we'll have time to get into. The final document that I want to show is an invitation to a ball in honor of the Marquis de Lafayette, who of course is another character, a friend of Alexander Hamilton's in the music hall. He was a French military officer who came to America and fought in the American Revolutionary War. In 1824, President James Monroe invited Lafayette to come tour all of the United States, all 24 states at the time. So Lafayette arrived in New York in August of 1824. And then he arrived in St. Louis on the steamboat Natchez at 9 o'clock in the morning on April 29th, 1825 for a one-night visit. So he was accompanied on the boat by Senator Thomas Hart Benton and the great explorer William Clark. He had lunch at the home of Pierre Chateau, which was located at Locust and First Street. And then that night, they had this ball in his honor at the Mansion House Hotel, which was located at 3rd and Vine Streets. Vine Street is now St. Charles Street. The mayor at the time, William Carlane, had asked the Missouri legislature to provide funds for a public reception, which the state did not provide. And so the people who attended this ball had to pay to attend it. So that's what I have in terms of documents. Now I will throw it over to Kelly to talk about the books.
Hey everybody, I'll just have my video up here in a minute. There's my video. Hi. Well, thank you so much. So I'm going to show you some of our book materials. So as they said before, I'm Kelly Brown and I'm the Acquisitions Library for the Missouri Historical Society's library. We've seen some manuscripts and other items from the archival collections, but I'm going to show you some published materials from our library collection. So the first couple items I'm going to show you are related to dirty politics, rivalries, and a journalist named James Callender. He was a pamphlet writer and was known in his time as a scandalmonger. He focused on writing about scandals involving prominent political figures. He wrote a series of pamphlets titled A History of the United States for the year 1796. And in a few of these issues, he wrote about Alexander Hamilton's affair with Maria Reynolds and Hamilton's financial speculation and corruption with her husband, James Reynolds. So Hamilton would not let this challenge of his financial honor stand and publicly explained his side of the story in his own pamphlet, which you'll see here, called Observations on Certain Documents Contained in Number 5 and 6 of the History of the United States for the year 1796, in which the charge of speculation against Alexander Hamilton, late Secretary of the Treasury, is fully refuted. The title is a mouthful, but you may know it by its more famous nickname, the Reynolds Pamphlet. Fans of the Hamilton musical will be very familiar with this pamphlet, as it gets its own song and is a major plot point of the second half of the musical. The title is almost as wordy as the 95-page pamphlet itself. In it, Hamilton admits that he did have the affair and he was being blackmailed by the husband, but he denied any financial fraud towards the government. Future President James Monroe ended up investigating the rumored financial corruption before the accusations went public in Callender's pamphlet. Monroe was one of 3 lawmakers investigating the potential fraud involving government funds. During the investigation, he learned of Hamilton's affair and the rumors of fraud. After confronting Hamilton about the rumors, he ultimately promised to keep the former Treasury Secretary's affair secret once he was convinced of his innocence of financial corruption. After the accusations were published, Hamilton believed Monroe had played a part in leaking the story to Callender. Monroe denied this, and the 2 men quarreled in person and by letters that escalated to a thinly veiled challenge of a duel. Aaron Burr was able to defuse the situation before it reached the point of violence. If I could have the next slide, please, Molly. Okay, so here is an interesting little detail that I usually show in person, but I'm going to give it a quick try with a photo we have here. So the spine in the previous picture of the Reynolds pamphlet is a little misleading. When you open up the book, you can see the actual thickness of the pamphlet. You can see here that the actual pamphlet is only half as big as the whole bound volume, with the other pages being blank and made of a different paper. Still, that's very long for a pamphlet. Pamphlets were created as an ephemeral object and were issued without covers. If you wanted to keep it long-term, you would find someone to bind it by itself or with several other pamphlets. And a future owner of a pamphlet might have it rebound. In this case, an owner had the pamphlet bound with extra pages in the back to add to its thickness, perhaps to give its binding a grander look on the shelf, more befitting its historic importance. Back to James Callender. James Callender's pamphlet severely damaged any of Hamilton's future political hopes. This impressed one of Hamilton's rivals, Thomas Jefferson, and he soon found a use for Callender's talents by pointing him at his own rival for the presidency, John Adams. Callender would eventually be charged and sentenced for sedition for his troublemaking. Once Jefferson was elected, he pardoned Callender. Callender wanted a government appointment as a postmaster as well, but was denied by Jefferson. Feeling he was being cast aside unfairly after his help, he turned his skill at digging up scandals to looking at Jefferson's secret, dishing up the dirt he had, including an accusation published in September 1802, claiming Jefferson had slept with an enslaved woman named Sally and fathered multiple children by her. Next slide, please. So what we have here is an excerpt from the November 6th, 1802 issue of a satirical anti-Jefferson publication called The Portfolio. This issue of The Portfolio includes a satirical poem about Jefferson and Sally Hemings. Many issues of The Portfolio from 1802 to 1803 include references to the affair. It reveals that even though Jefferson never publicly acknowledged the claims the way Hamilton did, the story was circulating in the public. Next slide, please. Okay, so this next one, Aaron Burr faced public anger after killing Hamilton in the 1804 duel in Weehawken, New Jersey. But Burr had a poor reputation with some members of the public before that. In 1802, James Cheatham, editor of the American Citizen newspaper, published a pamphlet critical of Burr titled, "A View of the Political Conduct of Aaron Burr, Esquire, Vice President of the United States." 1 year later, in 1803, William P. Van Ness published his own rebuttal pamphlet in defense of his friend, published under the pseudonym Aristides, titled "An Examination of the Various Charges Exhibited Against Aaron Burr, Esquire, Vice President of the United States, and a Development of the Characters and Views of His Political Opponents." This is the pamphlet shown here. But in 1804, Cheatham would publish a response to this response. William Van Ness would later be the second to Aaron Burr in his duel with Alexander Hamilton. Next slide, please. So Hamilton was still an influential person at the time of his death. He had many friends, followers, and admirers throughout his life. And he was a popular rising star until his scandal was exposed. William Coleman, editor of the New York Evening Post, which Hamilton founded in 1801, compiled these contemporary reactions and more in a pamphlet titled "A Collection of the Facts and Documents Relative to the Death of Major General Alexander Hamilton, with comments, together with the various orations, sermons, and eulogies that have been published or written on his life and character." So this 1804 pamphlet we have here has a correspondence between Burr and Hamilton, a description of Hamilton's funeral, contemporary reactions to his death, and more. So that is a real great document we have there. So I believe these are all of the book items I was going to show. So thank you so much for hearing us speak about our collections today. And I think we were going to open it up to questions and answers at this point.
All right. Thank you. So I guess we need to open the question and answer part here, Kelly. Looks like that one's for you, Kelly.
Oh, okay. So the question I have here says, our copy of the Reynolds pamphlet was bound by a later owner. Would the original pamphlet been bound or stapled together? Did they have staplers back then? I imagine it would probably have been some sort of simple sewing. Most pamphlets that you'll come across will really be kind of just like a signature's worth of pages. I don't know if they would issue them uncut, but I don't think they had staplers then. So I would say probably sewing, some simple sewing, and then just to hold it together, and then people could do it fancy later if they want.
Well, it looks like that's the only question we have.
We'll give it a few minutes. People are compiling those together.
I guess. So I had mentioned that Aaron Burr was charged for treason, which is an interesting other side story, which I don't know if I have time to get into or not, but he had in 1805 tried to get together a group of men. He was convinced that there was going to be a war with Spain, and he was met with a man named General James Wilkinson, and some other people, and gathered together a group of men to prepare for what he thought would be this war with Spain, which never happened. And he was really accused of that he was trying to start his own territory with Mexican territory. Anyway, I'm certainly no expert, but it was reported to Thomas Jefferson and by James Wilkinson, as a matter of fact, who turned out to be not such a great person to work with. And Thomas Jefferson immediately issued charges for treason. And like the duel, Aaron Burr was tried a couple of times, but always acquitted on these charges. It turns out that the primary piece of evidence was this letter that Aaron Burr had written to James Wilkinson, which it turned out, it came to be known that it was a letter that James Wilkinson had written himself and totally forged. So kind of a strange story of Aaron Burr that it's not dealt with in the musical, obviously, because it's not about Aaron Burr, and a strange thing that most people don't know about Aaron Burr. Oh, so here we have a question. Does the Missouri Historical Society have any documents related to King George III and his conviction that y'all, America will be back? Not that I know of. I would have to check our archives card catalog when I get back and let you know. Oh, so here the question is, was this the same James Wilkinson who was the first governor of the Missouri Territory? Yes, indeed it is. He was the governor of the Louisiana Territory, actually. And at the time he was also, wait, let me check my notes so I get this right. He was the chief of the U.S. Army at New Orleans and governor of the Louisiana Territory. Clearly, Aaron Burr picked the wrong person to trust with his ideas, because James Wilkinson was the one who gave the evidence to and alerted Thomas Jefferson to let him know what Aaron Burr was doing. Well, that looks like all the questions that we have. Oh.
It looks like we have one more.
Oh yeah. Who was Kingsbury that the letter was addressed to? So that was a man named Jacob Kingsbury. Unfortunately, I did not write down a lot of notes about him, but it was, I don't know if this person is in St. Louis, the person who asked the question, but it is the Kingsbury family that Kingsbury Road in St. Louis is named after. The family at that time was, Jacob Kingsbury was from Connecticut, but the family eventually came to the St. Louis area.
Do you have any more questions?
Nope,
Uh,
we do not.
Like we got another one that popped up about did people like Jefferson keep copies of letters they sent to others like Angelica, or do those letters come from the recipient's papers?
Oh,
Did people back in the day regularly save letters?
that's a great question. And I can tell you that Thomas Jefferson in our collection, it is hard to tell because we have some that are original letters that he actually wrote. There are some that were press copies that he wrote, and then there were others that are called polygraph copies. So Thomas Jefferson did keep copies of the letters that he wrote to other people. Oh, here's somebody asked, oh wow, did Alexander Hamilton write a note when he was at his deathbed? Which is a question from a first grader. I have to say I don't know the answer to that question, but I'm happy to try to find the answer and let you know.
Well, this is wonderful. Thank you both so much for this wonderful presentation. I don't know about all of you in the audience, but I'm hearing songs from Hamilton in my head with every letter and book that you showed us. So thank you both so much. I hope everyone enjoyed the program this morning. We have a full lineup this week of wonderful programming. We have a Chow In Chat on Wednesday at 12 noon and a fun dance party Thursday night at 6 o'clock. And then Friday, a full slate of storytelling in the morning and another wonderful program at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So please tune in and join us again for STL History Live. Again, thank you so much for all of our members. If you're not a member, please think about joining us, and you can see that information on the screen. And lastly, your input is so important to all of us. So if you could hang out for just a moment, you'll be receiving a survey in your browser. If you can complete that for us, we would really appreciate it. Thank you again, and have a wonderful day, everyone.
Hi, everybody.